Is my screen visible? Okay, so though I told you that I will discuss some application, but then we realized that we have a lot of things to cover. And then we decided that I'll cover MongoDB today and tomorrow, and I'll complete that portion. Don't worry, if you require, if you want, I'll create a small application and we will do it in a extra lecture after your exam. Yeah, this, okay, there is a question on offline that he's asking whether this MongoDB will be there in the sessional exam or not. Definitely it will be there in sessional exam. Whatever is covered, it is there in the sessional exam, right? But again, see, this MongoDB is not a small thing, first of all. It is a very big topic itself, and we are going to cover it only within 2 hours. I mean, that is 2 lectures, right? So definitely we are not going to, I mean, we will not be able to complete, we are not going to complete that, and will not be able to understand the each and everything of MongoDB. But whatever I will cover here, at least that would be there in the exam. Okay. And I'm just going to touch it. I mean, very big topic is that, but let us see how much we can do. Okay. And we are going to, I'm going to introduce this topic only, and then after it is up to you how you explore this further. Okay. So how many of you know about MongoDB? At least you must have heard about it, right? Right. And can you tell me what it is? Of course, it is a database. The name itself says it's a database, but what is different? I mean, till now you have, yeah, NoSQL DB, correct. Non-SQL, someone says non-SQL. So NoSQL, it is called non-SQL. In some literature, NoSQL means not only SQL. That is also considered. So it depends, but mainly it is not SQL based database, right? So what is NoSQL? Database used to manage huge sets of unstructured data. NoSQL kind of database, basically it is used to manage huge set of unstructured data. Because when we use SQL based database, that is MySQL or Oracle or all those things, there we have a structured data. Or if we don't have structure, we create structure out of the data, right? And then we put those data in the tables, and those tables are interrelated. You have foreign key, primary key concept, and all those stuff. You have join. If you want to fetch data from multiple tables in a single query, we perform joins and all those stuff, right? But if you have unstructured data, mostly text data or something like that, audio data, video data, images, when you have this kind of unstructured data, and if it is in a very big quantity, right? You must have heard this term, big data. Nowadays, it is, it is in market, you can say. So for this kind of applications where your data is very big, people are using more and more this NoSQL kind of database rather than SQL database, because SQL database has its own limitations when it comes to big data. Fine. So basically it is mostly used for big data or huge set of unstructured data. Data is not stored in tabular relations like relational database. As we just discussed, it is not going to be stored in tables. And this NoSQL database was designed to overcome some of the limitations of the relational databases. What limitations? Performance. Because if we talk about relational database, so many times you need to access that database in single query also. Rishi, I understand your question, but this is out of the scope for this subject. You will learn this big data in your 7th sem. So hold it for now, okay? So what kind of issues that are there in relational database, and how this are they handle in NoSQL. So one is the performance. Performance wise, it is speedy. Scalability, as I just discussed, that SQL based database cannot handle very big data easily. It can handle, but not easily. It becomes complex there, but it becomes easy in case of NoSQL. Data modeling. This is very interesting thing. In SQL based database, if you have, if you want to store something, first of all, you need to define its schema, that what would be the structure. Okay, how many columns will be there, what will be the type of the column, each of the column, and what kind of data can be stored there, and all those, right? So you need to define the schema. But in case of NoSQL, not required. Schema is not required. Data modeling is not required. Distribution limitation. It is difficult to have distributed database when it comes to relational database, but it becomes easy in case of NoSQL. So these are some of the limitations that can be overcome by these NoSQL kind of databases. Now, there are 4 varieties of NoSQL database actually. Okay. Currently in market, there are 4 varieties of this NoSQL database. One of them is document database, where key is paired with a complex data structure called as document. So you can think this document as a row of your table. If we compare this document, if we compare this document database with relational database, then this document is one row in the table. Graph stores, another type of database. So MongoDB is document database. What we are going to discuss, it is document database. Then there is a graph store database. Amazon Neptune is example which is mostly used for storing the network data. Okay, key value stores are there. Redis is another example. Wide column store. Cassandra, which is used in Facebook, that is the example of wide column stores. And HBase. Mainly you will learn this about Cassandra and HBase. Mostly you will learn about this in your big data subject in 7th sem. Okay, so of course I'm not going in detail of each of this because we are interested in document database right now. And again, you will learn this MongoDB maybe in your 7th sem again in big data subject, right? So here we are going to have just overview of that. So little bit about this MongoDB. It is open source, document based NoSQL database. It was developed by Elliot Horowitz and Dwight Merriam in the year 2007. It stores the data in the form of key value pairs. In a simple term, I can say it is nothing but it is storing data like JSON object. It is storing data in form of object which is like JSON, not exactly JSON object, but it is more you can say quite similar to the JSON objects, right? So you will see that one example after this. High performance and scalable. I hope you understand scalability. It means when data size grows, still it is easy to handle it. That is scalable. Cross-platform. You can use this database on any platform like Windows, Linux, or any other. This name, it is derived from the word humongous. Humongous means very big, right? And between that, there is a word called Mongo. So this name was derived from that to support the idea of processing large amount of data. Okay. So what is document-based database? It is a data structure with name-value pairs. Again, simple, text-based name-value pair. It is hierarchical data storage. I just told you JSON representation of custom objects. Okay, your object can be represented like JSON object. Schema-less. Okay, you need not to define schema first and then you can store data. No, that is the case with relational database. Here you need not to define that what type of values will be there in my document. You need not to define that. In fact, different documents within one collection can have different schema, different design, different key value pairs. So that is also possible. Data is stored in BSON, that is binary JSON. Internally, whatever data you store, they are stored in BSON format, that is binary JSON format. Okay, that is again not for our purpose. I mean, we need not to understand what is BSON because it is binary form of the JSON, which is used by this data engine, MongoDB data engine. So this is one simple example of MongoDB data. And you can understand that it is nothing but like JSON object, very similar to JSON object. Yes. Where this represents JSON object, this curly braces, And then these are the name value pairs or key value pairs, whatever you call it, key and values. By default, any document, this is one document. This is one document. Okay, you can say it is like one record or one row of your table. So there is one default key, that is underscore ID, which is used to give ID to that particular document. If you do not give it, by default it will be given. And this value, you can see it is of type object ID. We will see what are the possible data types that you can have to store your values here in this document. One of them is object ID, and it is 12 bytes data. The object ID size is 12 bytes. And what is the breakup of that? We are also going to see that. So by default, if you do not provide ID to any object, by default, it will be given by the database engine. And that is of type object ID, which is of size 12 bytes. Otherwise, then after you can have any type of data you can store here. I mean, not any type. There are around 17 types that you can use to store your data. And this is like, okay, can you tell me what is this type? Data, what is the type of the name data? It is object. It is object, right? Then this is date object, right? This is date object. And what is this? Array, right? Then this is number format, some number, long number, right? So number of data types are supported. We are going to see that, but this is simple document, sample document, you can say that. And this represents one record. This represents one record. What are the features of MongoDB? So IO operations, Ronak, that is why I just told you that it is JSON-like object, not exactly JSON object. If you have heard me properly, I just told you that it is JSON-like object and not exactly JSON object. And you are right, in JSON, when you write JSON object, even key is in a double quotes, right? But this is JSON-like object, and it is very easy to convert it into JSON object. In every programming language nowadays, there is library which can work with MongoDB. Okay. Fine. So what are the feature? Okay. Shiny is okay. So sir, multiple type of OBJ can be stored in MongoDB. Multiple type of object. I'm not getting, I mean, you are trying to say that you can store JavaScript object or something like that. Yes, Shanish? Can you elaborate? You can speak, no problem. Yeah, array, we have just seen that. You can store array also. This is like, JavaScript array kind of stuff. You can store this simple object. This is like JavaScript object, isn't it? But again, JavaScript object, it's a special type object because it can store functions also. Here you cannot store functions directly. Of course, there is one data type called JavaScript data type where you can store code also. But directly here you cannot store that, right? So, of course, we will see that what other data types you can use to store your values. Okay. Now, features of MongoDB. Again, there is a question. Rishi, you are asking me that I should elaborate more on Shani's question. Okay, so while Rishi comes back, let us continue with features of MongoDB. Oh, he has come. So Rishi, let us continue with this because Shani's question was very simple. What he was asking, what kind of object can be stored in MongoDB document. So it is MongoDB object. You can think that way. It has its own syntax, but it is more like JSON object. Okay, it is more like JSON object. And when we learn about this data types, then it will become more clear. Okay, what kind of data types you have to store your values in this objects that you store in document. At that time, it will become more clear. So features of MongoDB: IO operations are lesser compared to RDBMS due to support of embedded documents. Okay. Normally in a relational database, what happens when you perform join operation or something like that, you need to access multiple tables, and that is costly operation. Even if when you learned that in third sem, you might have been told that IO operation or any read write operation to the relational database or the tables, they are considered as costly operation because they takes time. So here in case of MongoDB, number of IO operations automatically it is reduced. Why it is reduced? Because you may not need to fetch your data from different tables, as there is no table in fact, and we are going to use embedded documents. Okay, you will understand what is embedded document. You will see that. So it is going to reduce that number of IO operations, and because of that, it becomes speedy. Good performance is there. Select queries are faster due to faster indexing support. Have you learned indexing in your third semester in DBMS? So you know what is indexing, right? And that indexing you can use here also in MongoDB, and it is very fast, right? Rich query language, like in RDBMS, which query language we use in RDBMS? SQL, that is structured query language, right? Here it is document query language, you can say that way, and it is very rich. I mean, so many things you can do with a simple queries, right? So very rich query language is there. Auto replication features leads to high availability. There is some configuration that you can do, and automatically your database replica will be created and distributed. So because of that, under case of failure, still your data will be available. Support for automatic failover. Okay, because you have multiple replicas of the same data. If you want, you can create that, and whenever there is failure, automatically it will switch to another copy of that. So that is supported. Horizontal scalability due to sharding feature. Have you heard this terms called vertical scalability and horizontal scalability? Vertical scalability means you increase your hardware to support more and more data, like RAM, or you may change your CPU, you update your CPU, right? So that is called vertical scalability. You update your hardwares so that you can support more things. Whereas horizontal scalability means you put your data in a distributed manner, right? On one machine you put something, on other machine you put something. So now combinedly you can access that. That is called horizontal scalability, and that is possible in MongoDB through the feature called sharding. Again, that is very, I mean, this kind of things are, it is more for the DB admin. So we are not going in detail of sharding and this failover and all this configuration, because we are more interested in queries and how this data can be stored. Support of multiple storage engine. Okay, so these are some features of MongoDB. And if we talk about advantages of this MongoDB, first of all, it is schema-less database. You need not to define schema and then you can store data. No, that is not required. You can directly start storing data without defining its structure. That is why this is no SQL. Dynamic query by document query language. Okay. Then scalable. No complex joins are needed because embedded documents are there. For an example, you have student table, and if you want to store address of that student, normally what we do in RDBMS, we create student table, we create address table, and then we perform joins. Student ID can become foreign key in the address, right? So that is how normally we design that schema. Here, what you can do, within student document, you put address document, embedded document. So address document will become part of student document. So you need not to fetch data from two tables. Rather, when you fetch single document, you will get all the information regarding that student. So that is there. SQL injection is not possible because this is no SQL. So SQL injection is out of question. Search by regular expression and fields, that is also allowed. You can use regular expression to search your data. No need of mapping application objects to data object because the document itself is an object. Janil, this is actually, this is completely false. This is not an overhead. Why you think that it is overhead? Where you see overhead? If you compare, okay, see this data, the way it is stored in NoSQL engine or MongoDB engine, right? It is in BSON format, which is basically binary JSON. And JSON is at the end, it is text. No, it is not that way. It is not that way. Okay. Fine. I may not be able to right now explain why it is, why it gives you better performance and why it is fast. I'm not able to explain it right now, but you need to, take this and you need to accept this, that it is having better performance when you compare it with the RDBMS, because RDBMS operations, they are very costly. To fetch a single data table, it is very costly. It is very time consuming. Okay. So right now you just take my words and you can believe on that. Okay. Again, no need of mapping application objects to data objects. So as the document that you store, that is also one type of object. And normally when you use data object-oriented languages like Java and JavaScript and all other, and when you want to work with data that is in form of object, normally what we do in Java, when we want to work with SQL databases, RDBMS databases, we use some kind of ORM, object relational model, like Hibernate and all those, right? In Java that we do. In other languages also you can do the same thing. If you want to use your MySQL or any RDBMS in the background or in the backend, and you want to work with that from object-oriented language, we use some kind of tool, ORM tool. Here that is not required. Okay, because the data which is stored, it is itself one kind of object, JSON-like object, and it can easily be converted into the programming language specific object because libraries are available. Index on any attribute, you can set index on any attribute of your data. Fast in-place update, you can update your data very fast in place. So these are some features and advantages of MongoDB. Maybe you are not able to understand some of the advantages because you might not have worked with that. And again, it is very detailed stuff. If you want to understand actual performance, you need to compare them on same data, and then you can compare it. And of course, comparison is done mainly when you have very huge data. With small data, you cannot compare it, right? So let us not get into the detail of that, but let us take this, let us accept this, that MongoDB is faster when you compare it with the RDBMS. And we accept this fact. And you can see the very well-known organizations that use MongoDB. Okay. Might be this list is a little older list. It might have been updated. Okay. Some comparison between RDBMS and MongoDB. So whatever you call, in RDBMS, the entity called table, right? We have table. Within one database, we have multiple tables in RDBMS, right? Like student table, user table, and so on. That table idea or that table concept is replaced in MongoDB with the concept called collection. So one database contains multiple collections. Then a tuple or row of your table, that idea or concept is replaced by a concept called document. The column of one particular table, now that is called field. Okay, so you can see that this is one document or one row, you can say. And these are the columns, or you can say fields. These are the fields, and these are the values of in that fields. Table join, normally we use join in when we want to fetch data from multiple tables. Here that is not required because that can be done with the help of embedded document. I gave you that example of student and address. Primary key, it is now here. Default key, that is _ID. Okay. And RDBMS, it emphasizes more on ACID property. I hope you remember ACID property. Okay. Whereas here they emphasize more on CAP theorem, consistency, availability, and partition tolerance. This is important, partition tolerance. It means data can be partitioned and distributed over multiple servers. So again, that is a job of database admin. And we are not right now going in detail of that part. Because right now we are more interested to understand how we can use MongoDB. Okay. And a little bit about this ID field, which is default one. Okay. Underscore ID. It is a 12-byte hexadecimal number. It's a 12 bytes hexadecimal number, assures the uniqueness of every document. And that's why it is also like primary key. If you don't provide them, MongoDB provides a unique ID for every document. Okay. If you don't provide, MongoDB will provide a unique ID. And how it provides unique ID? Because it is 12 bytes long, right? So MongoDB, it will provide this 12 bytes with this structure. First 4 bytes for the current timestamp. I hope you understand timestamp, right? What is the current time? Date, year, month, everything. What is the time of the day? Everything is considered in timestamp. So 4 bytes for timestamp. Next 3 bytes for machine ID. 2 bytes for process ID of MongoDB server that you are running. And remaining 3 bytes are simple incremental value like a counter. So by combining all these bytes, it generates a unique ID. It generates unique ID. Okay. And that is given to your document. Document means your record. So every record will have unique ID. Does this make sense? Are you getting it? Okay. Now data types. I told you that around 17 data types are there, right? Some of them are very rarely used and it is very internal. So the very widely used or very frequently used data types like string is there, integer, 32 or 64-bit depending upon your server, double, Boolean. So these are the normal data types that we are aware of. Then null, we know that it is used to store null value, and null data type is also there in JavaScript, right? Arrays can be used. It stores arrays, list or multiple values into one key. We know what is array. Object itself, like object here, object is MongoDB object. You can say that, right? It is used for embedded documents. Like if you want to store address object within student object, so that will be the data type. Object ID. That is mainly used to store documents ID. If you do not provide 12 bytes ID, then MongoDB provides that ID, and that is of type object ID. Even if you want to provide that ID, you can also do that with the help of this function object ID, right? And you can provide some 12. But in that case, you may not be, you may not you may not guarantee that uniqueness. Okay. You may not guarantee uniqueness across the world. This when MongoDB provides the default ID, it is unique across the world. Across the world. Okay. Object and object ID, and then undefined is there. So this data type stores the undefined values. We have undefined data type in JavaScript also, right? If you remember that. Then binary data you can store. So there is a data type called binary data. Okay. Date, you can store date objects. Min-max keys, these are actually used, internal mechanism. This is used for internal mechanism. It is used to compare a value against the lowest and highest BSON elements. This requires some explanation on that, but maybe some other time we will see one example on this. Symbol is also there in JavaScript, which is very similar to string, but it is itself one data type. Regular expression is one data type. Okay, so you can have your own regular expression. You can store it in some variable, and that is one data type. JavaScript. Now this is interesting. JavaScript is one data type. It means you can store JavaScript code into some field. The whole JavaScript code you can store into the field, and whenever you want, you can fetch it and you can run it. Okay. Then there is another type called JavaScript with scope. So where you can store JavaScript data or your code, and you can also mention what is the scope of that code. Okay. So again, all these data types, when you want to understand this, first you need to see some examples. So we'll see if we have time, we will have example on this also. And finally, timestamp is there. So these are the some uncommon data types, you can say. The first slides, they contains common data types. These are some uncommon data types. Date is not uncommon, definitely. Binary data is also not uncommon. But from this, min-max to this all, They are uncommon data types, but they are still there. And if you want to use, you can use it as per your requirement. You can use them. Now let us go to this part of installation. Very simple installation, especially when it comes to Windows. In Linux, you may find it little difficult. I'm not telling that it is difficult. A complete tutorial is available on MongoDB website. In whichever type of OS you want to install, you can install. Complete tutorial is there. You follow that tutorial and you will be able to install that. Okay. Here in this machine, okay, let me share the whole machine with you. Okay, let me share my entire screen so that you can see what I am doing here. Okay. I have already installed this MongoDB in this machine. This is Windows machine, and I have already installed that, and it is actually running. The task manager, and it requires admin password to, if you want to work with MongoDB server. Yeah, currently it is running. Can you see this? MongoDB server is running. I just installed that. It will give you MSI file. Okay, let me show it here also. So this is the website, and you can store here. I mean, you can download it from here. The latest version is 5.0.2. You choose your platform, right? And if it is Windows, it will give you MSI file. You download that. You install that. It requires administrator password. Okay. It requires administration right. And once you provide that, it will install it and automatically it will start running. Okay. And by default, it is getting installed in this path. So let me show you that path also. If it is Windows, it gets installed in C drive, program files, and then MongoDB. This is a folder, and then server is there, then version number, according to version number, this folder is there, and this is our installation. And this bin folder contains all executables. This MongoD application, this is your server application. You can run it from command prompt also. You can run it from the command prompt by executing this MongoD application. That is exe file. Okay, and then we have this Mongo command. Mongo command is client of your MongoDB. It is a client of your MongoDB. So this bin folder and this Compass, it is another software which is GUI based client for your MongoDB. MongoDB Compass, this is GUI based client for your MongoDB. This Mongo is command prompt based client. It is command prompt based client for your MongoDB server. And MongoD, that is daemon process, it is a server process which is already running, that we have seen. And another folder, data. So this data folder contains all your MongoDB data that you create. But you can see it is not normal text file. It is not normal text file. The data that you create, it is not normal text file. Okay, it has its own format. Internally, it is BSON format. This data folder contains your data, and then log contains logs. Let me see if I have this. So these are some logs. Yesterday I used that, and it has created some logs. So these are the logs, right? You can read this log, and you can try to understand what it is doing. Are you getting this structure? The installation directory structure? Okay. So currently we are having 5.0 version, right? Not 4.0. We have 5.0 version. And bin contains all the executables. Data directory now by default it is there. If you want to use any other data directory, you can create it. And these are some of the other components that you can have in your MongoDB server. Right now, we don't have all this, but some of the components you can have. At least we have these 3 components. In our current installation, we have these three components: MongoD.exe, that is your server; Mongo.exe, that is your client; and Mongo as.exe, that is router. That is a special component which is used in distributed database. We are not going to discuss that, sharding and all those. Then some other tools are also available. If you want, you can use them. Okay, import export tools and monitoring tools are there. Fine. So these are the other tools that are available to work with MongoDB. You need to explore this by yourself. We are not going to discuss this because we are mostly interested in this client part, because we are going to execute client, and then I'll show you how you can fire the query, document-based query, right? Or document query language. You can call it document query language, and how you can work with MongoDB servers or MongoDB or Mongo databases. So that is we are interested in. So let us start. How much time we have? Still we have 5-7 minutes, right? So let us see how you can start. And fine. In Windows, normally what happens, once you install, automatically it is started. If you want, you can stop it. But by default, the configuration is such a way that whenever you start your machine, that service gets started automatically. That is how it happens in Windows. In Linux, it may be little different. Okay. If you want to see how it can be done on Linux, I'm just giving you a little idea here. Okay, let me just search it. As I am using Ubuntu, and one more thing, there are two types of editions of this server, MongoDB server. One is community edition, that is free, and another is enterprise edition. That is license copy, right? You need to pay for that. And of course, when it is licensed, it provides more features. But for us as a student, for you as a student, you don't require that. And small projects can also be handled using this community edition. And this is the whole tutorial, how you can install it, okay, on Ubuntu. So if you want, you can follow this. Rishi, I don't know about that, whether you can access it using student mail ID or not, enterprise edition, but I don't think so. They must be charging for it. So maybe it is possible. I don't know. That is what I am telling you. What Rishi is asking, whether it is possible to access enterprise edition using student email ID. Maybe companies are giving some free trials. I'm not sure about that. It is up to company. If they want to do their marketing that way, they may be providing it. But I haven't used enterprise edition. I have worked only with this community edition, right? So I don't know much about it. But of course, I mean, there is nothing much different in that, right? Enterprise edition, simple thing, you have more features. That's it. Now, these are some commands how you can start the server. MongoD is the command. Basically, it's a exe file. You can just execute that, and it requires admin role. You need to log in as an admin. Okay. You must have admin password. Then only you can start this in Windows as well as in Linux, both case. And if you do not want to use default data directory, okay, where your database is going to be stored, you can always use this option, that is --db path, and provide the directory path where you want to store your data. Fine. So that can also be done while starting your server. You can do that. And if you want to start the shell or your command prompt, which is a client to your MongoDB server, the command is Mongo. In case of Windows, it is Mongo. In case of Linux, it is Mongo sh. The command in case of Linux, it is Mongo sh, whereas in case of Windows, it is Mongo command. And default port number of MongoDB server is 27017. Okay, if you remember MySQL default port, do you remember MySQL default port? It is 3306, right? So similarly, this database by default, it runs on 27017 port number. But if you want to change that port number and you want to run your MongoDB server on different port while starting, sorry, this is Mongo, this should be MongoD. Okay, this should be MongoD actually, because this is server port. And if you want to change it, you can use this option. you can use this option. Sorry. What it says, let's say your server is running on this port 28012, and if you want to connect to that, because when you say Mongo, it's a client, and it will directly try to connect to the server by assuming that it is running on default port 27017. But if your server is running on different port, okay, and you want to connect your client to that, you need to provide Mongo -- port, and you need to provide that my server where I want to connect, it is running on this port. So that is the point. Okay. And there is a configuration file also. If I can show you that file. This is the configuration file where you can do your configuration things like default DB path. See, default DB path is this. I just show you that default is data folder is the default DB path. Okay. And then log path. Log path is that same thing. This is the file where your log will be stored. If you want to change, you can change this. If you want to change the server port where it is running, by default it is 27017. If you want to change, you just change it here and your server will start on another port. And IP address, you can bind your machine IP address with that. Currently it is a local host, so by default it is 127.0.0.1. So you can change configuration of your server from this very simple document. This is just a text document. After changing this document, you need to restart your server and it will start on as per new configuration. And of course, there are multiple others like sharding related configuration, replication related, security related. So other configurations you can do here. But for that, you need to learn this MongoDB in very much detail. Okay. So this is also there, easily available. And okay, fine. So some of these commands, now we'll start with these commands in the next lecture. Tomorrow, I'm going to take another lecture and we'll complete this MongoDB and we'll learn some commands there. Okay. One thing, I passed that Google form to you to fill it up if you are interested in project work. I have got so many responses there, and I'm glad that you are interested. What I am going to do very soon, I'll be going to invite you people in one Google Meet and we'll have some discussion there. Before we discuss that, I want you to know, I want you to form your group. You just ask your friends if he has applied and you have also applied and you want to form a group. First, form your group, and when I ask, let me know your groups, right? Accordingly, I will distribute some projects. And again, what I am going to develop, max number of people, I think 3 or 4, that is maximum. I mean, more than that, if you have in your team, you will not be able to do it efficiently. Even 4 is very high number. 2 are, I think, optimal number, or if you want, you can go for 3. But it's up to you. And based on the module that will be given to you, you can decide your team member also afterwards. You can change it. Okay, so very soon I will invite you for a group meeting kind of stuff, and we'll discuss something there. Okay. Fine. So let us stop here for today, and we'll continue in the next lecture.